Okay, this is the June 25th core team meeting. And our first item on the agenda is legal issues. Florian's not here to talk about the uh, licensing copyright clarity. Does anyone else know anything about that? Have any updates? Okay, the other legal issues, the non-commercial forum terms. Nico, how's that going?
Good. I think so. I think we had general agreement to just relicense after a certain date everything under MIT Apache 2, just like RFCs. That's fine. It's like a simple flat structure, nothing complicated. I sketched out something and sent it to the legal team to get the okay on the actual language. They didn't get back to me with the draft, but that could be because I only sent it to them about 30 minutes ago. Uh, because I forgot to send it last week. But we did agree informally, like we had a phone call and they were like, yeah, just draft something and send it to us. So, hopefully it's good.
Okay, Florian's not here about white papers. Next is the target tier policy RFC. Anything about that?
No major updates. I forget if did I talk about risk fee and LMOs and so on. We're adding some new targets, tier two, but that's kind of going forward. And I'll try to circle back with Josh about the RFC again, try to land it. But
also, like I had a call with ARM and Microsoft about Windows ARM 64, and like they were wondering about on their RFC about separating tier one for cross compiling and tier one for the OS compiler. So like that's something that could be expanded on.
okay, yeah, let's talk about that maybe afterwards. I kind of would like to restructure into like a not so much tiers as like call it things things that we do for different targets.
Yeah.
It seems like they don't always fit neatly into one box or another.
Yeah.
You could still do like tiers means you have over 10 checkboxes or whatever, but like, yeah.
Just realized I don't have my headphones actually on. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Or like, a tier two thing is one that has all of these things, but we'll still show the checks because a lot of things are like almost tier two.
Yeah, like I think the names are really important. Like the feeling I got from both ARM and Microsoft was that being tier one, like just the label of being tier one, was really important for them to continue the adoption.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. We definitely want some way to say we bless at least tier one is like super important.
I think the current tier distinction of where tier one is something that we basically are guaranteeing, or like doing a very strong guarantee, and removing tier one will be a very hard decision for us. I think that is a commitment that we're making, and I think that commitment is useful to people, that not only is this supported right now, but this will be supported in the pretty far future unless something drastically changes. Uh, and like drastically changes could be something like Microsoft deciding to uh, basically stop supporting Windows XP, which they did, and stuff like that.
I mean, really, the whole tier system was cargo culted from Mozilla and Firefox anyway, right? Like, we never even
Right.
really evaluated if that's like actually how we would want to talk about supporting platforms in the first place. I definitely don't want to derail all of this into like, let's totally rethink all of the situation, but like, it sort of wasn't really like built for our needs specifically in mind in general.
So what are the next steps on that RFC? Or what are the next steps in general?
I think probably the next step is to get like maybe get Josh, Pietro, and whomever else wants to, and try to talk high bandwidth and just hammer it out. I think we got enough when we had like compiler team discussion and we got some general guidelines, but we need to just try to write out the actual thing.
Okay. Anything else pressing on that topic? Okay. Anything on rethinking working groups?
We had
Actually,
a meeting today. Oh, go ahead.
go on. Either one. We had a meeting today, and we talked about a proposal to basically have just two concepts, teams and project groups, and to take a lot of the teams would be basically things that are targeting an area but don't have a defined scope and have a kind of indefinite duration until they expand. And project groups would be like, we're doing this, we're doing X, and it has something that can be completed, sort of implementing a feature or bootstrapping maybe a process or something. And that would imply that we take the domain working groups and we either become teams or they move outside of the Rust org, because they're kind of more in this indefinite structure. And I think it would be okay to have an embedded team, for example, we said previously that they didn't have decision-making power, but that doesn't really make sense. They have their own RFCs and stuff. It's just they have decision-making power about the things that happen in their projects. That's like a perfectly good scope for decision-making. And I don't know so the next step we had planned to do, I wrote up a kind of description that I can throw out somewhere. The next step was that we were going to go over the existing working groups and fit them into this hierarchy and talk talk to the ones where it wasn't obvious and like see what they think about what they prefer, and we can decide if we like that. I think I haven't made up my mind yet, but I think I might try to, because I haven't made up my mind yet on how much I think it makes sense to encourage people to just set up something outside of the org versus not. Because I'm not sure what it really buys to be inside. Kind of not that different. But, I don't think we should be creating tons of new teams. There's only really you anyway. Go on.
I mean, like there was the advantage of being inside the org for the leadership sync meeting, in which they could ask for they could interact with the rest of the teams, but like that meeting is not happening anymore and the Zulip channel is pretty much dead. So like that actual advantage that being in the organization was present is not there anymore. Like I guess maybe if we do all ends again, like if COVID actually stops, like that could be a distinction for official things.
I mean, I think it's a visibility win. The all hands is a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
I think another thing that's interesting about it, and I'm not sure if this is the type of guarantee we want to make with a team, but I know at least when we were talking about like working groups and teams, there was a sense of like some exist over a long period of time and others kind of like spin up and spin down. And when I think about adding teams that have decision-making power over other things, as opposed to like what we've already deemed official Rust core things, it makes me think of like, for example, with Rust WASM, right? The tools that Rust and WASM like owns are not like official Rust things. But if we were to say create a Rust and WASM team, I think there would be an implication of maintenance for Rust WASM's properties over a long period of time. Now, obviously I'm a fan of that, but I think that it's interesting to think about it like, for example, with like the network working group, we found that like the ecosystem versus official like became an issue. And I think that this transition from working group to team might play into that like even harder. And it is, I think, taking on the responsibility of like maintaining certain properties over a long period of time. And given the working groups that I think we might be thinking about, the status of the maintenance of some of those properties might be very poor at the moment. And I say that like implicating myself, not anybody else, like directly. So I would love to like look at and think about that and decide like, because to a certain extent it like blesses these things, and like are these things that we want to be blessing and doing so in like a really direct way? And should the ones that like say created their own Rust orgs and stuff, like what the permissions around those are?
Right.
Anyways,
that's one of the questions. I mean, I think another structure that I've seen play out, or that we've talked about at least, we've seen it. We've done it like it's on the smaller scale in the compiler team, but it's that you have a sort of project group that has the goal of bootstrapping something, and then maybe like if it works, you make a team to support it. And so you could view the existing domain working groups as like, well, their scope was temporary. It was to try it out and see, let's make some tools and see if we can build up a maintenance culture around them and so on. And, if that hasn't worked, well, that's okay. That's just, we won't then go on and make a team around it.
Yeah, I think that there's a really interesting thing between usage patterns and maintenance patterns also, because they're not always the same. Like I could also say like a working group's goal was like to create something to like get people building these things in an easier way, not necessarily to build the maintenance culture. And I do think a lot of teams ended up achieving that, but like struggled with the long-term maintenance part.
So a thing that occurred to me is that like when it comes to long-term maintenance, we already have a pretty wide range of teams that cover most long-term maintenance things. So, for example, embedded would kind of make sense parented by the libs team for long-term maintenance. Like now that they're no longer doing the project group-like nature of actually they still kind of are of like let's explore this space and try to make things. They are now basically maintaining libraries and continuing to make more, but still kind of doing maintenance. This would make sense as part of libs. WASM might make sense as more part of tools, I guess. I'm not sure, but like
a long time ago, I know NRC and I talked about like should that be part of cargo? So
yeah. So like I think like we do, instead of having a bunch of tiny teams at the top level, it might be worth like figuring out, looking at these started off as project groups, and kind of now that they're at least WASM to me seems to be done with the project part. It's like it's now maintenance, and as it's maintenance, you move it into the appropriate team that does that kind of maintenance. I'm not sure if embedded is still done with the project part yet, but yeah.
I mean, in theory, WASM's not done either. Like one version, like the WASM 32 target build chain is, but then there's like a whole bigger question around WASI stuff. So yeah. But anyways, not to get into details, but I like that suggestion a lot. I think that having them be adopted by larger teams, I think that will also really help them, because if we have too many top level teams, we're not going to have enough people.
Right.
And at least just what I've seen at this generation of Rust, we tend to have like a core set of people that are on like all the teams. And so if we just like make more teams, we're not like necessarily making more people, which is can be really hard for people to like balance workloads and actually build sustainable maintenance.
My impression is that the embedded group in particular has a relatively active folks. So like that's why I brought them up specifically as well. I might bring them in as a team. I think the other groups are struggling a lot more, but I'm not sure. We have to talk about it with them.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should move on. The last item on the public agenda is alumni on the Teams pages. Has anyone had any new thoughts or anything? I know we were just kind of taking time to think about this from last week.
I still think we should list them. I don't know if we have to put them on the page or not. I'm okay either way.
Them as the way they're tiny right now, and maybe make them collapsible or collapsed if it keeps growing.
I just meant the metadata.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so does that, I forget what issue we were solving with that.
It was just a general, like, what happens when people, like, should we even have this as a concept? Because there's like people's stuff change over time for a number of different like reasons and ways and things. It's like it's like a thing that's treated as immutable, but the actual information is mutable.
I heard someone talking.
Pietro, was there a change to the teams that a PR that wasn't working or something?
I think there were some working groups, and did we want to track working group alumni? And I think what we had decided was it depends on the type of working group, because working group was like a leaky abstraction. And I believe that Mark and Pietro just kind of decided that until the term working group got a little bit more settled, that they would just do it using their discretion as they come in.
Works for me.
Yeah, that was the point.
Okay, then it sounds like that's resolved. So I'm gonna take that off the agenda. Is that right? Okay. Does anyone else have anything for the public part of the meeting?
Just very briefly, and it's kind of related to the target tier, but with the new Mac target triple coming out, I feel like some sort of official, like louder communication about plans around doing that whenever we have them, which we may already have, would be, I think, something people would really be excited about. So like on the blog or something, we should just be loud about it.
I mean, we can post a post right now saying that we don't have any clue what Apple is doing.
I would probably avoid doing that, though. I'm not
I
like.
mean, no, yeah, like that came off badly. Like, we haven't got any news, at least from what I'm aware. We don't know when the LLVM support is going upstream. We don't know when, if we are going to get hardware. So like, there are way
Right.
more and
I
I guess
I have applied for hardware, but I don't know if I'm getting it or not yet, incidentally.
the thing that I think that we might do is just start a tracking issue and potentially like tweet or post on internals like, hey, we don't really know that much right now, but don't worry, we're on it. And here's the issue. And when we know, we will post here. Because otherwise, I think we might get like 100 community members filing 100 issues going like, WTF, are we screwed? And so maybe just being a little ahead of it will take care of stuff.
I mean, I already got that privately, but like,
Perfect.
like,
Just need to
yeah,
make it public.
I think we need to like coordinate more between infra and compiler, because like, at least from like, we are not going to get to tier 1 immediately. Also because like seeing what happened when we try to improve Windows and Linux for ARM, like there were and there are still some issues. Like Windows doesn't still have fully working unwinding on Mac OS. And so like, even if we get tier 2 support, we're not going to get tier 1 from the start, unless a miracle happens. And so
Totally.
like, what I'm saying is that initially it's mostly just compiler and infra figure out what we can do, and then when we're actually ready to make the call to whether uplift it to tier 1, then we can get the rest of the core involved.
We only have 9 minutes and have to hop to the private session, but I guess my point was, I don't expect us to have everything sorted out immediately, but we should start the communication soon so that if we get to set the expectations, then everything's going to go a lot smoother, I think.
Yeah, does anyone have any objections to making such a tracking issue and announcing? And who is going to do that?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Like,
I can work with Pietro to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
like,
right.
I'll coordinate with Nico on the compiler side.
Sounds good. All right. I'm going to switch to the recordings.